According to Forbes, America has 735 billionaires worth a combined $4.5 trillion. But how many billionaires are there really? When Forbes publishes their list, they add a small qualifier that almost nobody notices. There are 735 listed billionaires in America, because nobody knows how many there really are. Forbes employs more than 50 employees in 16 countries to compile their list. According to their methodology article, they use public financial records, interviews with employees, rivals, attorneys, and they attempt to validate the numbers by contacting the billionaires directly. Some cooperate and give Forbes access to their personal finances so they can report a more accurate number, but the magazine admits that most don't.
But on the other hand, these billionaires often don't want you to look under the hood, and they're constantly finding clever ways and different ways to filter their money, move it around, try to hide it, or just coming up with just new tax strategies.
Much of the list is an estimated guess, but there are also a lot of billionaires out there that will never show up on the list even though they should.
The list is really a list of individual billionaires rather than, widespread family fortunes. And the same thing for people asking about Vladimir Putin or things like that. It's hard to break out where money is so intermingled with the government.
One group are the crony government leaders using their country's central bank as their own personal credit card. But I think there is another group that is even more interesting than that. Forbes and Bloomberg, who both get a lot of online attention from their billionaires list, have behind closed doors admitted that they have no way of keeping track of the most common type of American billionaire. In an interview with the New York Times, Carrie Dolan, the editor who oversees the Forbes team responsible for the annual list, gave a profile of a billionaire that they would never be able to find. She told the Times that it's someone who quietly sold a stake in a business for, say, $250 million in the 90s and then invested it well. That's it. That's all there is to it. $250 million is a big exit, especially back in the 90s, but it wouldn't have made the news unless it was a well-known household brand. Most good businesses of this size are boring and only sell their products to other businesses. As a former investment banker who has worked on a lot of these deals personally, I can tell you that $250 million exits happen every day, and sometimes it's not even the founders who are walking away with all of the money. Silent early investors in a private company would only show up on the paperwork in the part that tells the acquirer where to send the money. If a person took all of their earnings from a sale in 1999 at the height of the dot-com bubble and put all of it into the market and then spent a meager $1.2 million a year or $100,000 a month on themselves, they would now be worth $3.3 billion, and nobody would know unless they wanted them to. There are flashy individuals that want to show off their wealth, and there are billionaires that couldn't avoid attention because the companies they founded are too well known. But most billionaires are invisible to everybody but their close family, their accountant, and the IRS. There are three very important reasons why these billionaires do this, and two fascinating strategies they use to make sure they stay under the radar. The first reason that most billionaires try very hard to stay off the Forbes list is because of the problems that come with public notoriety. Lottery winners are routinely harassed by people begging for money, filing frivolous lawsuits, and family members pitching them a business idea over Thanksgiving dinner. The average lottery winner is 7 times more likely to declare bankruptcy than the average American, and the public attention they get is a big reason why. Not only is getting chased for your money annoying and costly, it can be dangerous. Known wealthy people are the logical targets of kidnappings, burglaries, and blackmail. High-profile business leaders and celebrities employ personal security, but it's difficult for these teams to always cover all their family members. Personal security is also expensive and inconvenient, because they need to travel, work, and live with you to remain effective. A nice relaxing life enjoying your riches can quickly turn into another job of managing a security team.
Executive protection agents serving Bollywood's biggest stars can earn more than $300,000 a year.
If nobody knows who you are or what you have in your Schwab account, then all of these problems can be avoided, and that's just the first reason. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why most billionaires don't show up on the Forbes list and what tricks they can use to hide their wealth. The second reason that most billionaires try very hard to avoid being included on the Forbes list is because they don't want to be seen alongside the same people that normally get included in the magazine. A lot of people that get articles written about them in Forbes paid for the privilege. Magazine subscriptions are down, and selling online ads doesn't make nearly as much money as selling physical copies did back when it was the most popular way to read these publications. Magazines like Forbes have had to look for alternative revenue sources, and doing paid articles is a lucrative option. People with C-suite career ambitions will get their PR manager to pay the magazine a few $1,000s to write a fluff piece about how they reshaped corporate culture at their last company. For a few $1,000s more, they can be included on a list like the Forbes 30 Under 30. Most of these lists are comprised of people that paid to be there, with a few big names like Sam Bankman-Fried and Martin Shkreli smattered in to give the list some credibility.
It was once an honor to be among Forbes' annual selection of 30 innovative business people under 30 years old. But in recent years, more and more individuals who have appeared on the list have ended up behind bars.
Forbes reports on a lot of people that want attention because they are the easiest people to report on. Business people normally only want attention if it serves them in some way. Linking a Forbes article on your resume and LinkedIn profile could be a good career move and worth the few $1,000s it costs. But for people who are already rich, it looks like they are desperate for attention. There is no way to tell who was written about in Forbes on their own merit, who was written about unwillingly, and who was written about because they paid for it. Established billionaires don't want people to assume it's the latter, so they just avoid media attention altogether. The other group of people that pay magazines like Forbes to write about them are scammers that make their money by selling online courses or cryptocurrency projects. If you watch some of their ads, you will see that they brag about being featured in Forbes or Money magazine, which gives them a lot of credibility, and they can win over some skeptical customers. Most people will think that magazines like this wouldn't play any part in promoting a scam, but they would.
Could it be that the Forbes 30 Under 30 list really just attracts entrepreneurs who really don't have a legitimate business just to land on their list for social proof?
The business people that billionaires work with every day know about this paid publicity, so for them showing up in Forbes is a mark against someone's business case. The third reason that most billionaires avoid publications like Forbes is plain old selection bias. The people getting featured in Forbes magazine are usually at the height of their careers or business success. After that, there is a long way to fall and not a long way left to go up. The people that are heads of major companies or members of high-profile families can't avoid it, but anybody that seeks out attention knows the risks, and does it anyway because they like the attention. People with these character traits will long-term be less likely to manage their wealth and their business effectively. They will be more likely to take large risks and be overly assured in their own business skills. People like Kevin O'Leary would be a lot wealthier today if they had just invested their early career winnings into the market and then did nothing else. Someone's financial success becoming public information can also turn a lot of their customers off their brand. People like to support small family businesses over soulless corporations, but if they find out that the owners are already billionaires, their customers' loyalty will not be as strong. On the expense side, a known billionaire will also be offered more expensive options anywhere they go. They will get overquoted by contractors and get judged for negotiating discounts. There are very few benefits of having one's wealth publicly known, and there are a lot of problems it causes. Smart billionaires understand this, and smart billionaires are more likely to stay billionaires. So you have just become a billionaire and you want to stay completely anonymous. Excellent. I have clearly taught you how money works, so here is what you are going to need to do. If your money is coming out of the sale of a business, make sure it is a private sale. These days, launching your company onto public markets through an IPO is only really necessary if you are going to be the next Facebook or Amazon. And if your company is that big, sorry, it's already too late for you. A private equity exit or acquisition from a bigger company is quieter and easier too in most cases. In terms of the deal, don't have to be public record in the press release, so there is nothing for the journalists at Forbes to dig up. Once you have secured the bag, you should then invest it broadly in the market and avoid putting too much money into any one company. If you own 5% or more of any public company, you must file what is known as a Form 13D with the SEC. 13Ds are public for anybody to see because the SEC wants investors to be aware of who the biggest shareholders are in a public company. If someone with more than 5% of the company's shares needed to sell quickly, they would push down the stock's price significantly. Investors should pay close attention to who a company's top shareholders are, because if it's the people that will be in a bad financial situation personally, it will be bad for the stock price even if the business fundamentals are good. As a billionaire that values their privacy, you would be best served to limiting any individual investments to no more than 4.99% of the company's shares. This has the additional benefit of making sure you are diversified as well. Another way the SEC can snitch on you to Forbes magazine is through a Form 3. This must be filed if you own more than 10% of a public company, or if you are a company officer like a CEO, CFO, or chief legal counsel. A Form 3 also needs to be filed if you are a company director, so if you want to stay hidden, don't take too many of these positions. You can have $1 billion portfolio, and only the holdings you have in the companies you are a director of will be public. So if you want to sit on a few boards, you can, but it will put your name out there. The other way that your wealth becomes public knowledge is through lawsuit discovery. If you get sued, anything that gets turned up by the lawyers is entered into public record, except for in the rare circumstances that evidence gets sealed. The best way to avoid lawsuits is to avoid attention. So as a new billionaire that's trying to stay out of the public eye, you are already doing everything right. Billionaires will also take advantage of holding companies and trusts set up in states that have strong asset protection and privacy laws like Nevada and North Dakota. If you live outside of America, you should consult my video on the Panama Papers to find out how the global billionaires get it done. Once you have the accounting set up, the next step is to just avoid the ostentatious displays of wealth. You can still live in a beautiful home, just make sure it's in a private area and that it's not the most expensive in the area. You can still drive a nice car, but don't post about it all over social media. You can still fly private, but don't put a logo or name down the side of your plane. Your best defense is being too boring to write about and for your actual wealth to be too difficult to verify. If you ever get a call from any of these publications, just laugh quietly and tell them that you wish you were worth $1 billion and that you would prefer that they didn't imply that you were, because that would be materially inaccurate. If they have no way to definitely verify your wealth, they won't risk adding you. Billionaires are not like you or me, but it's really important for them that you think they are. So important, in fact, that some of them are now spending millions of dollars every year for PR agencies to spread the message that they are just regular people that drive regular cars, eat at regular restaurants, and live in regular homes. But in the age of flex culture, why the f are these people trying so hard to look normal?
Why don't you buy a Lamborghini, man?
I didn't have any particular need for one.
I only say that because I've got a follow-up question.
Okay.
What's with the Honda?
This is a perfectly good car.
You bought a house for $45K?
Yeah.
What is it, like big or is it?
No, it's small.
Is it
very small.
It's a tiny house,
That's great
right?
value, $45K.
Yeah, no, it's a small house.
I could buy any house in the world, and I don't want any other house than the one I'm in. You know, and that house is in a middle-class neighborhood. I'm happy in a pair of khakis and a sweater, so I don't need fancy clothes. I don't need fancy food.
Do you have an iPad?
I do not have an iPad.
iPhone?
No.
The now convicted fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried once had billions of dollars of customer funds at his disposal to live a lavish life in the Bahamas. In the early days of FTX, Fried and his co-conspirators reportedly drove around in the expensive sports cars typical of crypto bros. According to evidence presented during his trial, SBF would later sell the cars and advise other executives at FTX and Alameda to do the same because it didn't fit with the image of the company that they were trying to present to customers and investors. SBF's shitty Toyota Corolla that paid influencers made such a big deal of was about as authentic as the company's internal accounting department. The car, the haircut, the wrinkled haircut were more carefully managed than customer funds. The group did this because they knew that the image of a boy genius that didn't care about luxuries or power would be appealing to people looking for an honest place to keep their funds. SBF and the rest of the gang were all frauds, but putting a lot of effort into crafting a folksy image is done by most prominent business leaders for 3 simple reasons that are mostly bullshit. If you know these strategies, you will be able to see through what is little more than personal marketing. The first reason that they do this is because even if they aren't running a fraud, acting like an everyman still gets people to give them what they want. Stealth wealth is when rich people buy products that are of high quality but does not flaunt their wealth. They do this because they don't want the attention and problems that come along with people knowing that they are rich. Billionaires doing a Bloomberg or Nas Daily interviews featuring their basic car and geeky wardrobe is not the same thing as stealth wealth. Instead of hiding their financial means, these people are just trying to show off as loudly as possible that they don't care about their money, or that their money hasn't changed them. It's not stealth wealth, so let's call it poverty peacocking, and it's a great move for their personal brand and any companies they represent. Humble CEOs are the new fashion. The world's biggest companies are run by men who wear hoodies and turtlenecks instead of tailored suits, and other business leaders are trying to emulate that trend because investors like it. If business leaders very publicly give up flashy luxuries, it also sends the message that they will be frugal running their business, and the data actually backs this up.
What role has luck played in your success?
Well, there's luck enters into everybody's life.
According to a study conducted by the National Bureau of Economic Research, in 2012, CEOs and CFOs who were not frugal in their own spending were more likely to have instances of insiders perpetuating fraud and were more likely to push equity-based incentives to increase their own income. The study separated personally frugal and flashy executives by looking for purchases like a personal car that was worth over $75,000 or a boat that was over 25 feet. Billionaires and executives didn't actually want to give up their luxuries, so they just started lying about it. Buffett does own an old beat-up car, but he is usually driven around in a fleet of Suburbans with a security team. Zuckerberg wears the same gray shirt every day, but they are custom-made by Brunello Cucinelli. Musk does rent a tiny home next to the SpaceX factory, but the Wall Street Journal pointed out that he spends most of his time in an 8,000 square foot $12 million mansion, and all of these men fly private. They are welcome to these luxuries. It is their money. But there are still two more reasons why they try so hard to pretend that they don't exist. The second reason that really rich people go above and beyond to look normal is because it is an effective sales tactic. If you make millions or even billions of dollars in your life, I have good news for you. Unless you made your money as the founder and CEO of a household name company, or you are a celebrity, it's really easy for you to live a life where nobody knows who you are apart from your family, close friends, and the people that work for you. According to Forbes, there are 2,640 billionaires on Earth in 2023, down from 2,668 in 2022. The publication also admits that many billionaires are not included in this number because they could not collect data to accurately report their private fortunes. Even if you are really interested in personal wealth, you would probably know 50 of these people at most, and the rest just look like people in suits. The point is that every other rich person you know about is only known about because they want to be. And why would they give up an easy life to enjoy their wealth in peace? It's because their own success is one of the best ways to sell stuff. Whether it's Musk promising that full self-driving is just around the corner, Trump slapping his brand name on everything, or Kevin O'Leary role-playing as a businessman to pitch FTX, people buy success. People also buy relatability, so the clever billionaires that want to use their image to boost their own company will make sure that people can see them living lives that people can relate to, and aspire to at the same time. The New York Post recently ran an article about Warren Buffett's wife, who was supposedly overheard complaining about how expensive a $4 cup of coffee was at the annual Allen & Company Sun Valley Conference, which is nicknamed the summer camp for billionaires. This story is also picked up by publications like Business Insider that ran it with the title, "Warren Buffett just became even more relatable for a billionaire." If it wasn't obvious, let me ruin the fun for you. Nobody at this conference would have passed along this kind of personal conversation to the press. You are reading about it because they want you to read about it. Buffett's frugality is credited in his investment company's success, so he is selling an image just as much as Trump is with his steaks and O'Leary is with his wacky pants. For Buffett, this is a better story than a bunch of billionaires getting together to talk in private about, well, who the f knows? The only information that seems to leak from these events is how expensive the coffee is. Being relatable is an equally important sales tactic to people who want to sell a get-rich-quick course. An important element of any grift like this is that people need to believe that someone has become wealthy, and that they can do it too. So grifters will often talk about their humble beginnings while standing in front of a rented Lamborghini. This creates a situation where a lot of the people you see promoting their courses on YouTube will be poor people, pretending to be rich people, pretending to be poor people. Billionaires and get-rich-quick course salesmen presenting a different image of themselves to the world than who they really are behind closed doors probably won't surprise most of you. But there are two ways this lie is hurting the personal finances of regular people. The first way is simply the financial harm that buying into the trope of the relatable millionaire or billionaire can do to people who follow them blindly. Successful people telling regular people to cut down on luxuries to improve their financial situation is fine. But if they are telling them to cut down on luxuries to take on a side hustle so they can spend their money on a course instead, that's obviously bad. And it tragically happens all the time. It's easier for people with something to sell to ask people to cut down on discretionary spending if they have already built up a personal brand around driving a cheap car and living in a tiny house even after they become a millionaire. Being a frugal millionaire is also easier to fake if the supposed millionaires ever get questioned about the legitimacy of their own success. Obviously, grifters building an image so that they can sell a bad investment or overpriced course are going to do serious financial damage to the people they rope into their schemes. But even the billionaires paying their PR teams to get them positive media coverage about how relatable they are still doing damage to a lot of people's personal finances, because they are reinforcing a common trope in personal finance that everybody's financial problems are caused by them spending too much. The lies that very wealthy people tell about their humble cars, basic homes, and average lifestyle makes it easy to guilt people for enjoying little luxuries, because if Warren Buffett drives an old car, why do you need a new one? This does not excuse the reckless spending that a lot of Americans are guilty of, but it does take the attention away from their income. After a certain point, people can't improve their personal financial situation by being more frugal. They need to increase their income. And that's the third reason that billionaires spend too much money on looking poor. It helps them keep their workers in line. The accounting firm Ernst & Young, in a report, estimated that the number of family offices in the world had doubled between 2001 and 2016. Family offices are investment firms dedicated exclusively to managing the wealth of a single family. Where you and I have some shares on Robinhood or Schwab, the ultra-rich keep their money in family offices. An article by Barron's reported that one of the fastest growing expenses for these firms was public relations. Many of these family offices are so big that they now have as much influence as private equity firms, and with influence comes scrutiny. Private equity firms are some of the most hated financial institutions because they have a long history of bankrupting beloved companies and laying off thousands of workers, all to try and turn a slightly better profit.
Right. That's exactly right. What we've seen, in industry after industry where private equity buys up businesses is that they're really responsible for some of the worst, most abusive business practices in the country.
The scrutiny has been very bad for private equity, but the anger is only directed towards the managing partners of these companies. When a family office does the same thing, public outrage over job cuts would be blamed on the family, and that's where a good PR team is employed. It's easy for workers to demand better wages from a company owner who is photographed lounging on a super yacht. It's easier for a company owner to push back against worker demands when all of their public profile is about how they try to save every cent they can in the name of their business. The author of the article concluded that corporations became people, as people too became corporations, and every corporation needs a media relations department. Doomsday prepping has been around since prehistoric mammalian creatures stuffed some extra nuts into a tree to survive the winter. Humans, and especially American humans, became particularly fond of planning for the end of the world during the Cold War when nuclear Armageddon was a very real possibility. Ever since, it has become something of a utilitarian hobby for millions of people, spawning a multi-billion-dollar industry selling bunkers, ration kits, bug-out bags, and hunting supplies. The demand has grown so quickly that top-of-the-line air filtration systems have become collector's items because there simply aren't enough for everybody who wants them. What is interesting, or maybe a little bit concerning, is the particular group that is planning for the end of the world in higher numbers than basically anybody else: billionaires. In a game of survival of the richest, people like Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel, Sam Altman, and the former CEO of Reddit have all reportedly invested tens of millions of dollars in lavish accommodations to wait out the end times. These are just the ones we know about in a game where discretion is obviously a big advantage. So why the fuck has there been such a boom in doomsday bunkers for billionaires? And is this all just really stupid?
Inside, this 54,000 square foot complex boasts everything you could need to live through the end of the
doomsday sort of a place where he can in fact go into hiding in case there is doomsday that happens.
According to Forbes, there are 2,781 billionaires alive as of March of 2024. There are likely many more that the journalists at Forbes don't know about. But even from the recorded list, that is a lot of individuals from a lot of different countries and backgrounds. Counting all of these people together as a single consumer group shopping for the end of the world is a bit unfair. But they do all have three things in common that make them particularly willing to make big investments into big holes in the ground. The first is that to get to where they are, they would have learned about the value of preparing for adverse outcomes. Whether that's making sure that their business had contingencies in place to get them through a bad quarter, or adjusting the allocation of their trust fund to ride out down markets, ultra-high net worth individuals inevitably learn to preserve what they have. A multi-million-dollar bunker with indoor swimming pools, golf simulators, and enough utilities to stay off the grid for decades is just another way that they can hedge their comfortable lifestyle against unforeseen downturns. Details are obviously scarce because these individuals want to keep their plans secret, but reporting by credible insiders have revealed that some of these individuals have multiple bunkers set up in places like Alaska, New Zealand, as well as their home cities so that they have contingencies for their contingencies. The second similarity that makes doomsday prepping particularly appealing to ultra-high net worth individuals is that they are already used to insulating themselves from the everyday world. Through choice or necessity, high-profile billionaires don't live normal lives. For their own convenience and protection, they fly private, have security personnel, and staff on call to do mundane tasks like get groceries for them. According to the industry research firm Technavio, global spending on private security has boomed to $330 billion and is projected to reach almost $500 billion by 2028. Certain companies are now including security allowances in the salary packages of their top executives. Before he retired as the company CEO, Jeff Bezos was given $1.6 million a year to cover his security costs by Amazon, according to company filings. Now, to play devil's advocate on behalf of the billionaires, their public notoriety does make them targets for kidnapping, blackmail, or just revenge by disgruntled former employees who filled up one too many piss bottles. The point is that the idea of living in a bunker is not that insane to people who already live lives insulated from the rest of the world. The third reason rich people are so amenable to preparing for the end of the world is because they're rich. Incredible journalism, I know. But to average people like you or I, even a modest survival shelter to ride out basic natural disasters is a major investment. To them, a decommissioned missile silo or a bunker in some country left off half the world's maps with provisions to last decades off the grid is less than a day's work. So, why not? A report by the Financial Times describes how survival bunkers have become yet another status symbol to collect alongside the New York penthouse, the yacht, and the private jet. Now, it's their money, and they can spend it on what they want. But this is all incredibly stupid. There are very few people more dependent on the systems of a modern society than billionaires. Their wealth is only possible because of the reach and industrial capacity of our modern world, as well as the people who are willing to work for them because of systems that won't survive when doomsday bunkers become prime real estate. Flying around the world takes a coordination of pilots, air traffic control, and maintenance technicians, not to mention the supply chains needed for the jet fuel to fill the planes in the first place. Billionaires can motivate people to perform these roles because they have a lot of money. But if that system of exchange breaks down, they might not even make it to their far-flung bunkers in the first place. What's more is that nobody stands to take a larger quality of life hit than a billionaire in the modern day. They might survive, but the goods and services they consume to give them the lifestyle they enjoy just wouldn't be available in a doomsday scenario. The logical conclusion for people with this many resources at their disposal would be to focus on avoiding the apocalypse rather than preparing for it. But unfortunately, this is not how they think. Oh, and this is far from the dumbest thing about these billionaire bunkers. Douglas Rushkoff is a writer and media theorist who is, amongst other things, one of the early pioneers of the cyberpunk genre and coining the term viral media. He was also the first person to widely draw attention to how much time, effort, and money ultra-high net worth individuals were spending on the end of the world. Rushkoff is an advocate for open source systems and spoke about them a lot before they were mainstream, which, for better or worse, has made him very popular amongst the people in the tech industry. With that popularity, he has said he frequently gets requests to come and speak at events held by tech leaders and their companies, often for tens of thousands of dollars a day in speaker fees. In a 2018 article that he later turned into a book, Rushkoff spoke about a time that he was invited to one of these speaking engagements and the money offered was simply too good to turn down. But instead of giving a speech, he was instead directed into a small room to speak directly with 5 super wealthy individuals, who he didn't individually identify, but he did disclose that they were all from the hedge fund industry. Another surprise is that these men weren't interested in discussing Rushkoff's ideas about futurism, technology, media, or anything that he is famous for researching. They instead wanted to talk about how to prepare for the apocalypse. The reason they were interested in Rushkoff was not because he had any credentials in the field of survival shelters, but because they wanted him to use his expertise in developing open source social systems to fix a problem they were having. These unidentified men and others like them had hired highly trained teams of security personnel to keep them safe when traditional national security could no longer be relied on. According to a market report by Business Research Insights, the global primary military security market is now worth $220 billion and is expected to grow to over $300 billion by the end of the decade. That growth has mostly been from commercial transport security through unstable areas like the Suez Canal and personal security for individuals. In an end-of-the-world scenario, the teams of ex-Navy SEALs that these people are hiring could certainly fend off most would-be looters. But while they could keep their clients safe, there was no way that their clients could keep safe from them, in a scenario where money had lost all meaning. What they wanted was for Rushkoff to figure out a social system to keep these hired security personnel subservient to the billionaire in a situation where they had all the power and there was nothing really stopping them and their team from claiming the multi-million-dollar bunker for themselves and their own families. In his article, he reports that they were experimenting with ideas like putting shock collars on their hired mercenaries so that they could incapacitate them if they tried to rebel. Ultimately, Rushkoff pointed out that most of these efforts would be futile, and perhaps the best solution was just to be nice to the hired help before the end of the world comes about. Understandably, the billionaires disregarded this advice as commie nonsense and are presumably in talks with a more amenable cyberpunk author to design their bunkers. Now, as with everything in this world, it's hard to independently verify what exactly was discussed at this secretive event, or in fact, if it even happened. It could be just a good premise to sell some books, and I will be leaving a link to it below. But it still speaks to a clearly obvious trend of wealth becoming more and more insulating. One of the takeaways from Rushkoff's book and article was the question that has started dominating the mind of ultra-wealthy people. The actual bunkers were just an extension of a trend of people trying to hide themselves away from a society that doesn't like them. Now, this isn't some metaphorical, the real bunkers are the enemies we have made along the way, but it is the third reason why this is all incredibly stupid. There aren't many people in the world that have more influence over how successful our society is than the people who can afford these multi-million-dollar bunkers. It would be much better for everybody if they simply used their resources to avoid these problems in the first place rather than planning on how to deal with them once they become a reality. But an increasingly popular philosophy amongst the same group of people means that some of them might actually want this to happen. Accelerationism is the idea that radical change can be brought about by intentionally intensifying capital accumulation, technological change, and demographic shifts to destabilize traditional systems and effectively rebuild something better from the metaphorical or literal ashes. On the surface, the whole thing sounds absolutely insane, but the broad ideas of the theory have been adopted by a lot of very high-profile individuals like Sam Altman, Gary Tan, Elon Musk, Rupert Murdoch, and Peter Thiel. Most of these people are heavily involved in technology, so making big claims about how the world can be radically reshaped by their AI systems might just be an effective way to create buzz around the capabilities of their companies. Or it could be that they are running these companies with this kind of inherently unstable future in mind. Before he was a household name, Sam Altman of OpenAI in an interview with The New Yorker said that he had an arrangement with Thiel whereby in the eventuality of some kind of systematic collapse scenario, synthetic virus breakout, rampaging AI, resource war between nuclear-armed states, so forth, they both get on a private jet and fly to property Thiel owns in New Zealand. Now, another possibility is that all of this could just be a way for people to justify to themselves that hoarding wealth and recklessly experimenting with potentially dangerous technology is all to serve a bigger purpose than their own personal enrichment. Who is to say? Joe Scott made an amazing and fairly balanced video on accelerationism a few months ago where he went into a lot more details than I did here, so I will leave a link to him down below. Most of his videos are awesome. Even if all of this is just something for really rich people to work on in their spare time, it has created a huge industry in and of itself, and there are people ready to hype up the inevitability of the end of the world if it secures them a contract to dig a multi-million-dollar hole in the ground. Now, another element to this is how these billionaires have handpicked countries to set up these rather serious operations in. Last month, Jeff Bezos settled on this $90 million mansion on Indian Creek Island in Miami. That is the third 8-figure property purchase the Amazon founder has made in Miami in just the last 12 months. But the billionaire migration to Florida is making even Jeff Bezos' $200 million portfolio of properties look downright modest. According to the New York Post, Citadel Security CEO Ken Griffin has purchased 17 oceanfront estates, some worth as much as hundreds of millions of dollars individually. He is now knocking them all down to make way for one single beach house for his retirement that is estimated to be worth more than $1 billion once complete. None of these billionaires are native Florida men, but it's not the sand and the sun that's bringing them down there. So why the fuck are billionaires scrambling to get into Florida all of a sudden?
Half of the state's top 10 billionaires live in South Florida.
The very largest corporations have saved an enormous amount of money in taxes under Ron DeSantis.
People are flocking here, celebrities, business professionals, everyone alike.
While other parts of the country are cracking down on billionaires and their extravagant lifestyles, Florida is trying to make itself the perfect hideaway for them and their money. According to the LA Times, the mayor of Miami actually personally courted Elon Musk, encouraging him to move his primary residence and business to the city. South Florida wants to be the perfect place for you to live, if you're extremely wealthy. Miami has always been a popular destination for the ultra-wealthy to spend their summer vacations. According to data collected in a study by the global wealth management firm Henley & Partners and compiled by Visual Capitalist, Miami is the most popular vacation destination for the world's 25,000 centimillionaires. Those are people with a net worth of $100 million or more. In the past, most of these ultra-high net worth individuals would return back to their real jobs in real cities like Seattle, New York, San Francisco, or Los Angeles. But now, they are moving to Miami for good. And they are doing it for 3 surprising reasons. The first reason is that Florida is a safe haven for wealth. A unique quirk of Florida law makes owning a home there a unique financial tool. Florida has unlimited homestead exemptions on personal bankruptcy, which means that if someone declares bankruptcy, their primary home cannot be taken from them to pay back their lenders no matter how expensive their home may be. The law was created to make sure that Floridians always had a place to call home even if their business ventures went wrong. If you are a billionaire and you are afraid that your personal finances are falling apart, you can buy a home worth $100 million in Florida. Since the state sets no limit on the value of your homestead, even if you do go bankrupt, you still get to keep an asset that you can set up with generational wealth. If you don't ever go bankrupt, then a 9-figure mansion on Palm Beach is a really nice insurance policy that you get to live in. Other states do have similar unlimited homestead exemptions, but not many of them have homes worth enough to preserve the wealth of a billionaire. Florida has the right combination of property taxes, property values, and property laws. Oh, and it's also still a nice place to live, if you're a billionaire. But using Florida as an asset bunker is just the first reason. Now, if there is one thing that explains why billionaires do anything, it's normally to avoid tax. The bombshell 2021 publication of leaked IRS information by ProPublica revealed that billionaires are happy to spend tens of millions of dollars on accountants, lawyers, and bankers if it means they get to save hundreds of millions of dollars on tax. Florida has no state income tax, so you might think that billionaires are moving down there for the tax break. But that's not the full story. The second reason that billionaires are rushing into Florida is to avoid the wrong types of tax. Jeff Bezos does not make most of his money from a salary. According to company records, even when he was the CEO of Amazon, Bezos only took home a salary of $82,000. The company also gave him an allowance of $1.6 million for him to pay for security and staff travel for company business. That part of his compensation package was not considered taxable, just like a delivery driver wouldn't be expected to pay tax on the money they are given to fuel up their truck. Bezos did not get the money to buy hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate from a paycheck. He instead gets it by selling billions of dollars worth of Amazon stock every single year. According to Bloomberg and SEC filings, in February of this year alone, Bezos sold $8.5 billion worth of Amazon stock over a 9-day period. Since he got his shares effectively for free when he started the company, this sale is all profit, but that profit is capital gains, not income. Capital gains income is treated differently in the eyes of the IRS and state tax authorities in Washington, where he resided up until recently. Bezos is taxed at a much lower rate on the revenue of the sale of his shares than he would be on a normal income that high, which is why if you have a decent job, you are probably in a higher tax bracket than poor old Jeff Bezos. Moving to a state with no income tax like Florida would reduce the income he pays on his $82,000 salary by a few $1,000s, but that much money wouldn't buy a single cog in the clock he buried in the desert, so he isn't exactly going to move across the country just for that. What did conveniently line up with Jeff's move south was a new law passed in Washington state that would tax its residents 7% of their annual capital gains above $250,000. According to company filings, after the law passed, Bezos stopped selling his shares until he became a legal resident of Florida, and now he has started selling again. A CNBC article has estimated that the move will save the Amazon founder $600 million a year, which is enough to buy him his new yacht every year. Florida has made it clear that no such funny business will happen to its billionaires, but that doesn't mean that it's not getting anything out of this deal. The celebrities and rich listers are still spending a lot of money in property and municipal taxes, and they are bringing jobs with them. A state like Washington, on the other hand, which was trying to increase its tax revenue by taxing its richest residents, just made them leave. As more ultra-high net worth individuals make Florida their home, it just makes it even more attractive to other ultra-high net worth individuals for a reason which is equal parts finance, business, and human nature. People like to interact with people who are similar to them. Studies by UC Berkeley and the National Library of Medicine found that the thing most likely to decide who you interact with is how much money you make. You are going to find it more comfortable to hang out with people who can afford the same activities, relate to the same problems and opportunities, live in the same areas, and most of all, live lives that you can relate to. The only problem for them is that there are only a few thousand people worldwide that live the lives they do. There are very few people who can even afford to partake in their leisure activities unless the billionaire is funding it, which puts an asymmetric dynamic on any relationship. So rich people flock together in major cities where not only they can keep each other company, but they can also share amenities like world-class golf courses, marinas that can dock their 300-foot mega yachts, private jet terminals, gated communities, and world-class entertainment. The businesses that provide these services naturally follow where the money is. So there are only a few places where a billionaire can access all of the amenities they need to live their life. This is pushing ultra-high net worth individuals into a smaller number of concentrated global hubs. According to Forbes, almost a quarter of all the global billionaires that they track resided in just 11 global cities. Miami doesn't crack that list yet, because it's not making any billionaires of its own. Yet. But that's also starting to change. Michelin star chefs and yacht captains are not the only people following billionaires to Miami. There are also new startups following the money and talented workers following the exciting new companies. Florida's friendly business regulation and wealthy inhabitants have made it a real financial hub that's easier to attract talent to than more expensive and less lifestyle-friendly cities like New York. In an interview with Bloomberg, Ken Griffin, the man building the billion-dollar mansion on Palm Beach, said that Miami could become the new financial capital of America, overtaking New York, which is currently the city home to most billionaires in the world. Griffin moved his company headquarters from Chicago to Miami in 2022, so he either really believes in the city or he needed to justify living on the beach to his investors.
Are you paying more in taxes than the world's richest men, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk? Surprise, surprise, you just might be.
I never pay taxes. If there's a way not to pay, I never pay.
My friend Warren Buffett pays a lower tax rate than his secretary.
The wealthy are definitely undertaxed relative to the general population.
These same folks are paying taxes at one of the lowest rates in 50 years.
People didn't get rich by paying a lot of taxes, and for some of them, avoiding Uncle Sam has become their favorite pastime. Say what you will about billionaires, but they can be a very creative bunch where their money is concerned.
Yeah, that's right.
Last year, ProPublica, a non-profit investigative journalism organization, leaked a cache of IRS files that contained tax information about the richest people in America. Dozens of journalists and forensic accountants were able to reverse engineer a number of systems that billionaires use to pay much lower rates of income tax than most regular working Americans. Some were so good at working their numbers that they paid no income tax at all, and some billionaire accountants were even good enough to get their wealthy clients classified as low or middle income earners so they didn't miss out on a stimulus check. ProPublica went on to publish 10 of the biggest and most morally questionable loopholes that the IRS files revealed. You probably won't be shocked to learn that most of these loopholes aren't possible for us regular people to take advantage of, but a few of them are. Of the 10 that ProPublica has published, 5 are genuine problems with the tax code that really do justify some policy reviews, 3 are just good business practices that everybody should be doing, and 2 are really just filler that the website needed to get to number 10 because it made for a catchier headline. Capital gains are the taxes that you pay when you sell an asset or equity for profit. If you buy a share for $10 and sell it for $100, you will pay a capital gains tax on the $90 in profit you just made. Capital gains taxes are very important to rich people because their fortunes overwhelmingly come from their investments, not from their regular jobs.
Income tax, state tax, inheritance tax, capital gains taxes.
In fact, up until his retirement as Amazon CEO, Jeff Bezos only received an $80,000 a year salary for his work. Most of his money and most of the money of other billionaires comes from the appreciation in the value of the assets they own. The problem comes when they need money. They are still people after all, and they need to buy food, clothes, homes, and fuel for their private jets. You know, the essentials. The simple way for them to get this cash would be for them to sell some of their assets. This is especially easy when their assets are liquid, like shares in a public company. If they do this though, they will have to pay capital gains taxes if the assets they are selling are worth more than what they were purchased, and hopefully, if the billionaire is making good investments, this will be the case. If the billionaire wants to avoid this, they can work out just how much they want to live off of for the year and they take out a loan. They don't pay tax on cash they receive as a loan, and if they put up collateral like the shares that they were thinking of selling, then they will pay a very low interest rate. As an added benefit, if the assets appreciate at a higher rate than the interest rate on the loan, they will actually be better off than before, even considering the tax advantages of this hilariously named buy, borrow, die tax strategy. Unfortunately, the loans that the billionaires use to make this work are only available to the type of people that have the department at the bank dedicated just to them.
Under what circumstances would you be obligated to cooperate with an FBI or U.S. Justice Department investigation, for example?
Ça dépend.
Ça dépend.
Wait.
The closest thing that regular people will get to this is a home equity line of credit, which in many ways is just a small-scale version of the same strategy. On the topic of real estate, it is the centerpiece of many billionaires' portfolios, not in small part thanks to the amazing range of tax breaks available in this industry. The government wants people to invest in homes, so it has tax policies to encourage investors to give people a place to live. Similar tax breaks are available to oil drilling and farming. It's a good bet that anything that the government views as an essential industry probably has some favorable tax policies written to sweeten the deal for billionaires putting their money there. One of the biggest allowances made to investors, specifically in real estate, is a 1031 exchange. This is a tax rule that lets investors sell investment properties for a profit and not pay capital gains tax on it so long as they use that profit to buy more investment properties within a certain time period. This has let property moguls flip their way to enormous property empires without paying a cent in tax along the way. To make this better for them, they can subtract the depreciation of their buildings from the rental income they make, which means with some clever accounting, they can have millions of dollars in cash coming in completely tax-free. If you think property moguls are bad, they have nothing on the owners of sports teams. These guys are the absolute kings of profiting off something that no policymaker would be brave enough to campaign against.
Nope.
Americans love their sports, and it's a huge industry that makes team owners a lot of money. Voters want to keep their teams, which means cunning team owners can effectively ransom city governments into paying for lavish stadiums for their teams under the guise of being a community center. But the grift goes much further than that. Sports teams are considered a depreciating asset, which means even if they are making a lot of money and actually increasing in value, the owner can claim a portion of what they paid for their team as a tax deduction in the years following their purchase. As if that wasn't good enough, player contracts are often set up in such a way that they are effectively considered a piece of equipment, not unlike a delivery truck or a fax machine. That means that the players too can be counted as depreciating assets, which, despite feeling icky in principle, can sometimes mean that sports team owners can claim depreciation twice on the same investment.
It's a real business. It's not, what's the right word? It's not a trophy asset like it used to be. It has to make money.
One of the smartest things a billionaire can do to avoid taxes is to die. The United States does have inheritance taxes, but there are so many loopholes in it that it's basically not worth talking about. Spouses, for instance, don't pay any inheritance tax on assets that are left to them by their late husband or wife. This is actually a good policy, because nobody wants a widow to have to sell her family home to pay an estate tax. But the IRS files have again shown that some billionaires take this generosity to the extreme. There is a tax rule called the stepped-up basis. What this rule does is that when someone dies and passes their assets to an inheritor, the capital gains gets counted from what the asset was worth at the time of the person's death. For example, say a billionaire made their fortune by investing in Apple in the early 80s. If they sold their shares today, they would have to pay capital gains on almost all the shares' value because it had appreciated so much. Instead, if they simply die, they can leave their shares to their partner or their children, and now the capital gains will be calculated at Apple's current valuation. If the inheritors then sold the shares immediately, they would pay no capital gains taxes at all, saving them millions. But for some billionaires, this is still not good enough. One billionaire, who will remain nameless because I don't want to get sued, inherited an oil company from her late husband in the early 2000s. She then did something you don't see rich people doing often. She told the IRS that the company was worth more than it really was. She did this because within reason, the IRS will agree to the value of a private company, because without being listed on a public market, it is really hard to find out what a company is actually worth. Once the IRS agreed that the company was worth $1.6 billion, she would later go on to sell it for $1.2 billion. Since capital gains were calculated based off the $1.6 billion figure her accountants provided to the IRS, this looked like a $400 million capital loss. Not only did this mean that she paid no taxes, it also meant that she was able to use this made-up loss to offset the income she made from her other investments in the years that followed. I will leave a link to the full story in the video description, because I have not even covered half of it here. It really is a wild ride. We all have to play by the tax rules, but those rules were written for the rich. If there isn't some loophole or scheme that will let a rich person avoid tax or claim an income so low that they actually get government subsidies, then they still have one trick left up their sleeves. They just use their money to lobby the government to introduce new tax laws which will let them get away with paying less. A $50,000 campaign contribution is a great investment if it gets a tax bill passed that saves them millions. A common theme amongst all of these tax loopholes is that they take advantage of systems that were designed to do good. We love sports, and the joy that they bring communities should be supported. We should be building more houses by encouraging investment in them. We shouldn't make people homeless because they need to pay a tax on their husband or wife's estate, and it's not fair to tax people for taking out a loan. These rules are the same for everyone, but they are designed for the majority, not a tiny handful of people that can make sure that these reasonable laws are written in such a way that they can reap some pretty unreasonable benefits from them. Most people alive today will never be able to retire. Almost half of all Americans report having no dedicated retirement accounts at all. And rising living costs means that millennials will need more than $1 million saved to retire comfortably. It's a bleak outlook for most people who will probably be working in some capacity until the day they die. But there are people with enough money to live several lifetimes in extreme luxury without ever needing to work again. And yet, they still choose to work, even at the expense of their health, their family life, and worst of all, their own net worth. So, what the f*** is stopping so many billionaires from retiring?
What the hell does Worm know about retirement?
Even with his children in leadership positions, it doesn't look like Arnault is ready to retire just yet.
Age really isn't much of a deterrent. It's a deterrent to everything else. I mean,
According to Bloomberg, the average age of a global billionaire is now 63 years old, and it's slowly getting older every year as wealthy people live longer and longer lives. Male billionaires are slightly older at 63.7 years, and female billionaires are on average 62.4 years old. Female billionaires have a longer life expectancy than male billionaires, but they still trend younger because several of them have been the beneficiary of an inherited estate or divorce settlement at a younger age. Forbes has also now reported that there are no billionaires under the age of 30 that are self-made. All of them have inherited their wealth. As billionaires are getting older and richer, an ever-increasing number of them are also working well into their twilight years. You might think that they are just obsessed with accumulating more wealth. The mental state of billionaires who just need more is a factor that we will get to soon. But for some of them, they would actually be even richer if they just took a step back and enjoyed their wealth. A report by the Associated Press found that Donald Trump would be worth as much as $13 billion if he had just taken his $400 million inheritance in 1988 and passively invested it into the S&P 500. That's a fortune almost double what he is estimated to have today by Forbes, even after the huge boost he got from the IPO of Truth Social. Love or hate the guy, you can't argue that he could have made life a lot easier for himself by just living off a passive investment portfolio. The world's richest man on the day that this video was recorded is Bernard Arnault, who is still the active chairman and CEO of the luxury goods company LVMH, despite being 75 years old, almost old enough to run for president, if only he were American. That's 15 years later than when most people hope they can retire, and only 7 years away from the average life expectancy of the average Frenchman. Succession planning has started to worry other investors in the company because the aging chairman has made it clear he doesn't want to step down despite the problems it's causing for the company. So it's time to learn how money works to find out the 3 reasons why billionaires refuse to retire. The first reason that billionaires don't retire, even though they have enough money to last them several lifetimes, is that a lot of them are just as stuck working their job as you are. A study conducted by Chicago Booth professor Steve Kaplan and Joshua Raw of Stanford found that 69% of billionaires on the Forbes 400 list started their own business. The remaining 31% of Forbes rich listers sourced their fortunes from inheritance, lucky investments, or through pay packages as top company executives. According to the Bloomberg Billionaire Index, Steve Ballmer is currently the 6th richest man in the world, but he made most of his fortune without starting a company of his own. He instead worked as the CEO of Microsoft after Bill Gates stepped down. Ballmer received billions of dollars of company stock for filling the shoes of Bill Gates between 2000 and 2014, and his role was considered so important that despite mediocre company performance during his tenure, he is now worth almost as much as Gates himself. The success of some companies relies heavily on the work of a few key people, who are often also the founders who are billionaires, on paper. If you start a business that becomes so successful that your stake in it is worth $1 billion, you still can't retire unless you have a way to liquidate your position. You can do this by selling your shares either through an acquisition or taking your company public. You can also get your business to generate enough positive cash flow that you can pay yourself a dividend and live on that income stream in retirement. Or, if you are very financially creative, you can use the equity you have in your company as collateral for a personal loan that you can then use to fund your retirement. Selling your equity in your company is the easiest option. According to data compiled by Morgan Stanley Research and published by the Financial Times, the size of private equity funds that specialize in buying businesses from their founders has increased by 800% in the last 20 years. The other way to sell your shares is through an initial public offering. But then there will be lots of rules about how quickly you can sell off your shares. No matter who you sell your shares to, the general public or an investment firm, they probably aren't going to want you to quit the second you cash out. Which is why a lot of private equity deals will have earn-out clauses with conditions around how long you have to work with the company after you secure the bag. The reason Ballmer was paid so much was because he was the only man in the world who could fill the shoes of Gates as the head of the company after he stepped back as the role of the CEO. According to the corporate law firm Reed Smith, the average earnout period is getting longer, and the average time that a founder needs to stay with the company after selling it is now between 1 and 3 years. So selling your shares will take time. Making a business cash flow enough to pay you dividends will also take a lot of time, and it could mean sacrificing future business growth. If your company is paying you a dividend, it can't reinvest that money into R&D or acquiring another company. If you are the only shareholder, that's your trade-off to make. But if you have other investors, they will put the pressure on you to keep the business growing. You could also use your company as collateral to take out a loan. This is popular with people like Elon Musk, who have used his Tesla shares as collateral on loans to fund his purchase of Twitter and for additional funding for SpaceX operations. Oh, and you still have the small inconvenience of needing to repay your loan, so you better get back to work. All three of your options are surprisingly slow, so most successful founders actually find it quite hard to ride off into the sunset. Despite our perceptions of billionaire tech bros starting companies in their college dorm, the average company founder is already quite old. According to research conducted by the Harvard Business Review, the average age of someone who starts a successful company is 45 years old. Scaling a company to $1 billion valuation took on average 5.5 years according to data from Fleximize, but the median is much higher because most companies don't scale as fast as tech startups. Finding a buyer and going through due diligence for a sale can take more than a year as well. And with an earnout period, the average business founder is going to be almost 60 years old at their earliest opportunity to step away from their business. Those are the financial reasons, but it's also silly to ignore the psychology of wealth at this scale, either good or bad. So far, we have assumed that you will need at least $1 billion in liquid assets to retire comfortably, but you obviously don't. Company founders that scale their company to be worth billions of dollars are going to receive several acquisition offers before they get to that point. Someone who becomes a billionaire from founding a business would have turned down offers to cash out for tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, all life-changing amounts of money for almost anybody. Someone who does that either believes in their company so much that retirement isn't even something they would consider, or they are just so addicted to watching a number go up that nothing will satisfy them. The statistical number of billionaires working well into their old age suffers from selection bias. Anybody who is happy with a reasonable amount of wealth would have cashed out well before they became a billionaire. Tom from MySpace sold the early social media site to News Corp in 2005 for $580 million. His personal stake after taxes was estimated to be worth around $200 million. He is not a billionaire, but he is currently living a life you would expect a billionaire retiree to be living. Compare that to Mark Zuckerberg, who could have also sold his stake in Facebook at the same age for even more money. And the only difference is that Zuck either wanted to accumulate even more wealth for the sake of wealth, or he just didn't want to trade in the lifestyle of being one of the most powerful businessmen in the world for some lazy days on the beach. And that's the third reason why so many elderly billionaires refuse to retire. According to a report conducted by Harvard Business Review, the average CEO works around 62.5 hours per week. You might think that sounds like a lot of work, but it is only slightly more than the average salaried employee who is now working 9 hours of unpaid overtime every week, according to an investigation by the payroll services provider ADP. Billionaire company leaders also have staff to manage their domestic chores for them, so their off time isn't eaten up by cleaning their house or shopping for food. So the total daily workload of the average professional is now probably higher than their CEO. The role of a CEO at a large company is also far less monotonous than most office jobs. And high-profile executives, who also have significant power over the board of directors, can tailor their role to be exactly what they want it to be. The role of a CEO at a Fortune 500 level is a lot more about big strategic decisions and high-profile appearances than it is about mundane management of company operations. A flexible, high-paying, important-sounding role where you get to talk to world leaders and celebrities while being surrounded by employees who admire you, or at least pretend to admire you, is a hard gig to give up for a lot of the type of people who are driven enough to get that job in the first place. We are going to be writing a follow-up article to this video about the harmful myth of the young entrepreneur over on our totally free email newsletter Compounded Daily. So if you want to sign up to read that, as well as get these videos a day early, then sign up at the link below. If you still don't understand why someone would choose to work if they could retire into a life of luxury, you should watch this video on what CEOs actually do day to day to keep on learning how money works.